13 and 14. He said, Jim, the cabal, as you refer to it, is very large. And in the next 5 years, their entire middle ranks are going to be eliminated. It'll be like 80%. The top 10% will remain in power. The bottom 10% will be the foot soldiers. And this will take about 5 years. I said, okay, so like 2019, we're going to get some big changes that'll be positive for the white hats. We didn't call them white hats then. We didn't even call them the Patriots back then. We called them the gold bugs, I think. And the people, the fair money, the Austrian School of Economics followers. What was his name? Oh gosh, I can't think of the leader of the Austrian School of Economics.
Ludwig von Mises.
Von Mises, yes. Okay, I actually met his daughter in Germany, and I didn't know who she was. Later, I was told who she was, but anyway, we're defeating. I think we've actually won the war, Andy. I know this is a very strange thing to say. I think we've won the war, and now we're trying to set up the structure for, you call it the fourth turning, I call it golden era, QFS era, whatever you want. We're trying to set up the structure and avoid the booby traps, avoid the debt man switches, avoid the, remember it was 2 years ago, we heard about the threat of the Marburg, which was smallpox and Ebola. Okay, it didn't happen. Okay, 2 years ago, we kept hearing about, well, we're going to get some nuclear events out of Kiev and Ukraine and maybe Poland, false flag. Didn't happen. Okay, they didn't happen because we won. And I know that's hard to swallow, hard to accept, but I swallow it and I accept it. And I got to tell you that I've got 6 starred items here. Ooh, notes. I don't usually have a lot of notes, but I wanted to be prepared for you, Andy. I got to tell you, you've been kind of a mentor in an informal way for the last couple of years. I'd see a video from somebody and I'd watch 10 minutes of it. Okay, I got the bulk of that. And then somebody else would do the same. And then I'd get a couple of videos from you and I watch the whole damn 40 minutes because I learned stuff. And I put it in the newsletter and it adds value to the newsletter. But I want to try to, I've been trying now in the last day or two to come up with a few items where I can say, I'm going to add value to your table. And here goes. I'll give a preface. It was about 5 months ago. A client of mine said, Jim, I've got a middle to high ranked military research contact, like scientific research. And he's very connected and he has permission to, it's not a leak. It's more like an intel drop. That's what they call it, an intel drop. And I've been getting it now for 5-6 months. And I'm telling you, they're deep. They're not 5 lines. They're 400 lines. There's a lot of information and some of it is scientific. And I don't want to get lost in the Malaysian airline. I want to get focused on some things that are really relevant right now. He claims that the white military alliance, you call it whatever you want. I call it Team Trump, the white hats. It's not just the United States, by the way. Trump is part of an organization that's far more than just the United States. He claims that Team Trump, with their confiscations and victories, mostly in the Pacific Rim, with gold wars, Team Trump has accumulated well over 100,000 tons of gold and maybe as much as 300,000 tons of gold. And 100,000 tons of gold is, I believe that's 10 trillion. So the 300,000 would be 300 trillion. Now, he did not say how it was going to be used. He didn't say it was going to cover treasury bonds. Another thing he said in the related item is that Trump is going to saddle the cabal with the $34 trillion in debt. It's not going to be loaded on the U.S. households. It's not going to be draining gold that like is an extension of Fort Knox, which got recovered. So Trump has got well over 10, maybe 20 times more than Fort Knox. That's just one item. Another military drop. This is a while back. Russia hid 120,000 tons of gold during the entire Soviet era. And they hid it in the Orthodox Church behind false walls and double basements. 120,000 tons of gold. So the Russians are ready. Chinese, they're battling with the Asian elder families, and I'd rather not get caught up in that. He said that the White Alliance with Trump is in command of the next generation high-tech tools, devices. And I could blow you away with a couple things, but I'll just do one because it's a little funny. Here's one, and this came from the same guy. Last July, he said, Jim, I got some news for you. This is through the contact. Got some news for you. Trump won next November. Now just put those tenses together, okay? Trump won next November. So when clients asked me in July, August, September, and October, I said, Trump won. He already won, so don't worry about it. He won in November. What? Okay, it's a head scratcher, and it's a time travel bit of evidence from numerous. Okay, here's one that's very recent. We've been told that there were 750 plane loads from the Vatican. No, it was a lot more than that. They got 40,000 tons out of the Vatican, and they're still pulling the gold out. There's an unspeakable amount of gold in the Vatican. I think it's connected to those, the tunnel, Istanbul, Jerusalem. Okay, it's very murky, that story, but you keep hearing 100 miles of chest-high gold. I mean, it's unfathomable. It's like 1 million tons. And let me finish this little soliloquy. I know I get carried away, Andy. I can go on and on, but I just heard from the same guy last week. Bank of America has 1 foot in the bankruptcy receivership now. 1 foot in. I asked, give me detail as much as you got. And this was a different military source, but it's been very reliable too. I got 2 really nice big military resources. Itchy ear, sorry. He said the word used was receivership. I said, okay, so trustee, U.S. government trustee, FDIC. And he said, didn't say FDIC. I said, what is it? He said, some kind of trustee, but it's receivership. I said, okay. Was there like a tripwire? Was there an event like with money laundering that got wrecked? Bank of America, money laundering, Bush narco bank, can't avoid that. And he said, I don't know, but that's very likely. I'll try to find out. Okay, Andy, there's a lot going on. And a lot of it has to do with gold. Some of it has to do with the big banks and how they're realigning. I honestly think that London got drained and the big U.S. banks are loading up, and you probably have a lot more information on that. Looks like it with the nod. They're loading up for the gold foundation. And I got to say something else. 18 months ago, I had a consult call, and these have been extremely valuable, Andy. I've done about 830 now in 5+ years. And they're boots on the ground. 1 in 10 is very valuable. The other 9 they're just good people, a lot of questions, and they're trying to learn. But this guy said, Jim, I was involved with some accounting, and every single big bank is loaded with gold ready for the next chapter. Every single big bank. I said, beyond Wall Street and the big 5? And he said, oh, yeah, but they don't have as much. The big 5 have enormous amounts of gold. They're not going to go under for lack of gold. And he said, don't mention this, don't mention that, don't mention this, because they'll probably figure out who I was and do me harm or cut me out of contracts. So, Andy, there's a lot going on, and gold is the future. And I'm excited by it all. But at the same time, I'm worried about something that I call the question of the seamless transition. What'll happen to credit cards? Will they all go away and be replaced by new ones? And every newsletter payment system goes to zero suddenly? Will credit for distribution, like in retail organizations, functions, will it go to zero and have to start over again? And we got 3 weeks of big fat nothing everywhere in the economy. Okay, there are a lot of questions, and Trump via Q has mentioned many times in the last 2 or 3 years, we're going to have it as seamless transition as possible. QFS is going to be a mirrored shadow system. And we're just going to walk it along and suddenly flip the switch. And we're running without any great interruption, which means seamless. And I just can't get a whole lot of confirmation on that. And therefore, I can't be real confident, and I'm worried, like many people are. But, here's one argument that you hear over and over again. Well, Jim, if your business gets wrecked from payment system, then so do another 150,000 or 200,000 businesses get wrecked. So look for the seamless transition. That's what I'm hoping for, Andy, but I don't know. What are you hearing about seamless?
Yeah, well, I think seamless will be very difficult in any transition. The question is it one that is it one that is a coordinated shift towards a new gold-backed framework, or is it something? Are the central banks who have been accumulating so much, as you're alluding to, are they hedging against a major currency event? That I don't know. One of the questions I was going to ask you, it's interesting, was that you've talked a lot about the accidental death, I think you call it, of a bullion bank triggering a systemic domino effect. Do you see that happening with Bank of America or with a bank? And who are the players that are most exposed beyond the banks? I mean, how far down the chain does this go systemically?
I think maybe a quarter of the S&P 500 companies. I didn't mention something that also came out in the Intel drop. I'll just say it because it's so important. I can't really say, well, I'm going to save that for the May newsletter in 3 weeks. And no, it's just too important. A quarter of the S&P 500 companies are at risk. And my military guy said it's a combination of criminal, finance, and insolvency. So, okay, it's not just big banks. So it's going to be like big corporation, multinational corporations. They're in trouble. And I said, how are they going to resolve that? And he said, well, hold on to your hat, because he was told by the military ranking guide. He said, Jim, I'm talking to majors and colonels, and they're in meetings with generals, and they've got permission to talk to me. And I said, this is great. Tell me all you can. He said, there might be a quarter. It's at most a quarter of the S&P companies, S&P 500. So, do your napkin math. You get 125 corporations. That's for the people who are math challenged out there. And there are a lot of them out there, and it's really quite disgusting. He said they're going to be assigned new CEOs and boards. I said, that's divestiture. He said, sounds like it. I don't know what else it would be, Jim. And I said, I don't either, if they're going to be assigned a new board of directors and CEO. So, okay, you asked, and the focus is really on the banks. And I have a really important point that I'd like to make. And we've got to learn from history. I know it sounds like so long ago, but for me, it wasn't. It was the Lehman crisis. It was 2008. And I gave a 1-year warning, Andy, 1 year in advance. I said, Lehman's going to fall. The credit default swap is zooming up. It's almost 1%. Normal is 15 basis points. Okay. The lesson I learned, and that was 17 years ago, was Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan had each more than double the exposure of Lehman in mortgage finance. just cockeyed, crappy quality credit default. Credit, what do you call it? Credit obligations, CDOs, credit. Yeah, I can't remember. They just make up names and this is very, very sophisticated. Yeah, CDOs, credit something obligations. And it was loaded with trash. It was like, Class B debt, and they called it AAA, and no one really checked. Okay, here's the lesson learned. Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan had more than double the exposure of Lehman, so they decided to kill Lehman. It was odd man out. They're always looking for odd man out. And in 2003, Bear Stearns was odd man out. They were long gold, short dollar. They had to be killed. It took a long time to resolve their book of long gold. They had, oh my gosh. Okay, so, and that was previewed a couple months in advance, but not by me. That was a learning process for me. And from that, oh my gosh, what's next? And it was Lehman. And I had some good tips from clients. I know colleagues on the credit default swap. Here's how it applies to now. Bank of America is involved. I got to say something. I'm not going to be talking about child-related crimes anymore. I've had my life very close to totally destroyed from dark occult forces. And if you don't buy it, I don't care if you don't buy the argument. It means you don't know shit about it. I will talk about money laundering because it's finance. My theory is this, Andy. Bank of America is going to be singled out as the narco bank with money laundering. They're going to be implicated. They're going to be wrecked. They're going to be put through trustee bankruptcy receivership when all the banks are just as involved. But Bank of America has the Bush moniker. JP Morgan, Citibank, Goldman Sachs, the others, they don't. And I believe I have a different source. It's a very different type. I don't want to describe it, but the person said Wells Fargo has resolved its problems at the board level. And that was done over a year ago. So I don't expect Wells Fargo is going to get picked on. It may be more than Bank of America, Andy. I really don't know. We might see some smear on JP Morgan because, as we know, they've got $240 billion in criminal penalties and fines for their criminal actions with fraud. And that's a cost of doing business. It's really disgusting.
Let me ask you a question, Jim. If we really are heading in this direction, I guess you could even call it a global reset. Who do you think is writing the rules behind the scenes, and what kind of system do you believe that they're trying to build, maybe on the ashes of this current one?
Oh boy. I've wondered that for quite a while, and I've got some guesses. I can only speculate. My sources don't know. And when I ask a question like to the military source, who's running this? Who's running this show? Who's making the top level decisions? I'm told that it's like a group of 10, and some people call it Q. Some people call it Q. And I don't really completely buy into Q. I do partially. I do tentatively. I do with some reservation. But there's a group, Andy, and we can't put a face on it. And I asked a very interesting question, I thought, about 6 or 8 months ago to some of these sources. And I said, could the rule, you call it rules, I call it policy. Could the high level policy for the new era, call it the digital golden era of finance with the blockchain ledger, could its rules and policies be written by supercomputers? And we got some interesting discussions, but nothing is resolved. And if I'm the one asking the question and they don't know a whole lot more than I do, then they're just guessing and they're not really adding to my knowledge base. You know what I mean? I don't mean to be arrogant in any way, but there are a couple of the people who I do benefit from their knowledge base regarding that sort of thing, supercomputers. Oh, I've got one guy who has some military research background, and I haven't been in touch with him, but he went off to Panama with the sovereign, what do you call it? Sovereign investor? Can't think of his name. Black. He said, Jim, Black is really cool guy. But he knew about supercomputer simulation.
Simon Black.
Yes.
He is very good. He's very good.
And I'm not a student of his, so I didn't benefit from that. But one of my clients was, and he's in New Jersey, and he's a really smart guy. And oh boy, he helped me a number of ways. But I think he might have retired from his business, and he said, I'm exhausted from all this criminality. He knew somebody in the HARP. Okay, that's where he added to my knowledge base in a 2010 visit for a couple of days. We just talked for hours. He said, Jim, I got nothing to do till tomorrow night. So we sat by the pool, had virgin pina coladas. I don't know what he had, but I have a virgin. I don't drink. By the way, I had my 38th anniversary of drug rehab.
Congratulations. Happy anniversary.
Okay. What he said was, when he was in military research, and he did it for about, he said, 6 or 8 years, he had one friend. He said, Jim, I had to get some distance from the guy because I realized that he was a psychopath. I said, were there many in military research? He said, more than you know. I said, well, no, I know that there's quite a lot. He said, well, more than most people think. I said, okay, what about this guy? And he said, well, he transferred out of my group to go to HARP. And I maintained the friendship, even though I didn't like him, even though I thought he was a psycho. I maintained the friendship so I could maintain an information line about what's going on with HARP. He said, HARP is real, and they are, he said, the guy over in Alaska said, we're having a lot of fun killing people. Okay, that's your psychotic personality. And that's why my client made distance. And I haven't talked to him in a few years. Okay, I get a lot of unusual information, but to answer your question again in summary form, I think there's some high-level generals who might be kind of smart in business and, make some business rules. I think there's quite a lot of white hat military involved in digital finance. And they need to lay off Reggie Middleton and give him restitution. For God's sake, this is absurd what they're doing. But I also think that there's a lot of simulation going on, supercomputer simulation. And what I've heard mostly about the supercomputer simulation is it's for warfare. We have a war with China and Iran, and we lose in 24 hours. We have a war with NATO and US versus Russia, and we lose in 48 hours. We have a simulation about future technology and, maybe a combination of food and water and disease and things like that, all the Malthusian factors, and it destroys the planet. And then you get that 2012 issue. All the different time machines, they stopped at 2012. Everything stopped at 2012. So they had a global conference and a meeting of the minds, and I think a lot of good people put their heads together. So, and they changed the course of human history in order to get past 2012. And there was a movie about 2012, and it was well done, kind of weird, but I really like the scene where they blew up Yellowstone. When Yellowstone, it's the biggest caldera on the planet. It's like 80 miles in diameter. It blew up with what's his name, Woody Harrelson. Look, I'm a movie buff. I'm a sports buff. And I like them both. And without them, I'd go absolutely insane.
Yeah, I can't imagine life without sports. Defined my life. I think about that quite often. I don't think I'll ever grow up from that respect. Let me ask you a question while we're talking about military. I've noticed there are very few people, you're one of them, that has said things similar to what I've been saying about the military's role in suppressing silver. You've talked about it. What do you think their incentive is? I think it's fairly obvious, but do you think that suppression is starting to fall apart?
Yeah, it's starting to fall apart. I think it's not just the U.S. military; it's the Chinese military. The Russians. Have you seen a map of global silver production? I'm sure you have. Russia's down the list, and Mexico is more than twice of all Latin America combined. Okay, it's amazing. I'm concerned about a silver cartel being formed, but my military guys don't really talk about their motive to corner the silver market. They do make mention that there's a lot of silver being destroyed with a cruise missile, something like 17 kilograms. I can't prove that number, but I keep hearing that number. And that doesn't validate the number. It only makes people more curious. Well, damn it, where's the proof? When I talk with my colleagues, Andy, not military sources, I have very infrequent conversations and intel drops with the military guys. They're once every 2, 3, 4 weeks, and I just drop everything. I won't even watch my Boston Celtics. You know what I mean? I'll just, okay, well, what's going on? What's going on? And say, well, I only got 10 minutes. I say, okay, that's good. What do you got? What I hear is that the military really needs silver, and their opinion stated meshes, it juxtaposes well with some of my best intel from colleagues. Silver is going to become a national security metal. And Mexican policy has confirmed that to a very strong extent. I heard that Russia, China are inviting Mexico to create a silver cartel. Mexico will be in charge of keeping all of Latin America, the Andean region, Ecuador, Chile, Bolivia. And there's one more, Ecuador.
Peru?
Peru, yes. I always forget one. It's hard to get them all. But Argentina's in there. But Mexico would be like the dog master, okay? We got these 4 dogs on a leash, or 5 counting Argentina. And if they make silver a national security item, metal, then all this talk about rare earth metals, it's going to be overshadowed by a factor of 10.
It's interesting to your point, Jim. China is number 2 largest producer in the world. Behind Mexico, number 3 is Peru. China has been going to Peru, according to Sean Kunkun, the head of Dolly Varden. I've talked with him about this publicly, and others who have said that China is openly going to the miners in Peru, disintermediating the market, buying the doré and the concentrate and sending it back. They've built a deep water port there. You put it together.